Keel. And now I have the privilege of introducing the champion, one of our champions from Congress, and one of our dear friends. Congressman Tom Cole has agreed to give us the congressional response. He is a fifth-generation Oklahoman, an enrolled member of the Chickasaw Nation. He's been serving Indian issues in Congress since 2002, and we hope that he continues in that position for a long time to come. Please help me welcome Congressman Tom Cole.
It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to follow my good friend, my fellow Chickasaw, Governor Jefferson Keel, Lieutenant Governor Jefferson Keel. Governor Keel was here to give you and did give you a thoughtful and an eloquent address. I'm here to prove to you that not all Chickasaws are thoughtful and eloquent. But it is my privilege to look across Indian country, and I do so like everybody in this room, or probably everybody in this room, as an American, and a very proud American. And I do so as someone who is very proud of my state. I know most of you are proud of the states in which you reside, assuming you're American citizens. But I also do that as a fellow Native American, and as somebody who is proud of my tribal traditions and my tribe. My forebears and my family were members of the Chickasaw Nation and leaders in the Chickasaw Nation before there was a United States of America. My great-great-grandfather was clerk of the Chickasaw Supreme Court before there was a territory of Oklahoma. And my great-grandfather was treasurer of the Chickasaw Nation before Oklahoma was a state. And so we approach this, as most people in this room approach this, with a very long and different and nuanced view of American history. That's not true for most Americans. They don't have the ability to draw from that tradition. And most of the problems we face when we deal with other Americans is largely because they're ignorant of those traditions and have not had the opportunity, quite frankly, to be educated about them. And they labor under many, many misconceptions of who we are and what our status is in the larger political system. In Washington today, I would say from a Native American perspective and from an American and an Oklahoma perspective, it's the best of times and the worst of times, to borrow a phrase from Charles Dickens. It's the best of times in many areas. We have, certainly in the House and I think in the Senate, bipartisan cooperation on Native American issues to an unprecedented degree. That's unusual. And frankly, Native American issues aren't partisan issues. I don't think should ever be approached in a partisan fashion. The reality is most of our interests span political parties, and some of them are absolutely irrelevant to the political dialogue and debate between Republicans and Democrats that goes on in this country. But what is enduring is our federal trust relationship as individual Indian nations with the federal government, and whether or not the federal government carries out its responsibilities in that particular area. In the appropriations area, where, as Jackie said, I specialize and spend a great deal of time, this has been a pretty good year for us. I want to commend the administration. I'm a very conservative Republican. Obviously, I have some differences with the administration, but each year that the president has been in office, he's put forward a real budget and a good budget and a serious budget for us to consider in the legislative process. And certainly on the House side, I can tell you we have a real bipartisan alliance on interior appropriations where most Indian funding takes place. Our subcommittee chairman, Mike Simpson from Idaho, our ranking member, Jim Moran from Virginia, have a wonderful partnership and working relationship. And because of that, and working honestly with the administration, we've made substantial progress. We increased substantially, 10% in the House, appropriations for the Indian Health Service. The president is facing a difficult budget. He reduced the BIA budget very slightly. We thought actually it was too much, and so we restored some of that funding. And if you look at Indian funding on things like impact aid, on things like housing, across the board, while it didn't see the same increases that we saw in other areas, it was actually essentially held harmless in the House. And that's a good thing when we're experiencing difficulties in other areas. So that bipartisan relationship has been very powerful and very good. I think you've also seen it expressed in the establishment in the Natural Resources Committee, for the first time in many, many years in the House, a subcommittee on Indian and Native Alaskan affairs. That's something that my good friend Dale Kildee and I have worked on for many, many years and finally came to fruition. That would not have happened if Doc Hastings, the Republican chairman of that committee, had not been supportive of that. And he put in as the chairman Don Young from Alaska, and we have no better ally on Native American issues than Don Young. And his partner in that, my friend Dan Boren from Oklahoma, is equally committed and equally knowledgeable. So that's been a really good thing, and it's provided a vehicle where we've begun to get much more in the way of attention, focus, and momentum for issues that are important in Indian country. Let me mention just a few of those. H.R. 2362, I'm a Chickasaw, so of course I'll always start out with my own legislation, which is a trade bill. A trade bill because we have a unique opportunity with the country of Turkey, which has a long-standing interest in Native American affairs and a profound belief that the Turkish people are related to Native Americans, and wants to move ahead and wants to partner with individual tribal nations for economic development. That bill has been heard in the subcommittee and is now awaiting floor action. Or we have H.R. 205, the Hearth Act by my good friend Representative Heinrich from New Mexico, Democratic bill. Very, very important in extending tribal authority in surface leasing areas, things that would give individual tribal governments precisely the kinds of flexibility and authority that Lieutenant Governor Keel was talking about in his address. And that's a bipartisan bill, a good bill. It too awaits floor action. We also have H.R. 1599, which is an economic development bill, which I've got forward. More importantly, because he's the chairman, Don Young is working on a major economic development initiative. Again, things that would give tribal governments the tools they need to control their own affairs and their own destiny. We've had hearings on the Carcieri fix, both on the bills that Representative Kildee has offered and I've offered, and I always like to say I'll take either one of those bills. I would be delighted if Representative Kildee's bill passed or mine. He's a wonderful partner, great friend. We're going to miss him when he leaves Congress. So we have a lot of things happening in the House of Representatives. In the Senate, and I don't pretend to speak authoritatively to that, we have my good friends, Chairman Akaka here and Senator Barrasso, his ranking member, but we don't have two better advocates. And they've worked hard to focus attention on Carcieri in the Senate. They've worked hard on economic development issues and to begin to educate their colleagues on a bipartisan basis and the areas in which we can move together. So we have a strong bicameral as well as bipartisan partnership in Native American affairs. I would be remiss not to have mentioned the administration as well. First, the personnel, many of whom are here. I see Secretary Echohawk and obviously Director Rubidoux here, but also Secretary Salazar. They have shown continuous, sustained interest and commitment to the movement of important legislation and important administrative decisions in Indian country. I said Kim Keegi, and we were actually talking about this. The administration has put in place advisors at senior levels at cabinet positions so that members that are coming into those, or individuals that are coming into those important positions have immediately available to them advice and counsel from people that understand Indian country and all its nuances. And of course, obviously, the presidential initiative on the Native American Nation Summit, I think, is really one of the hallmark contributions to institutionalizing and strengthening the relationship between tribal governments. I could go on, individual initiatives that the administration has taken on surface leasing and on renewable energy. I'd like to, as an oil and gas guy and a coal guy, to get some subsurface flexibility there, but we're going to work on that. And this was a very important step in the right direction on the part of the administration. So there's lots of good things happening there. And again, the good things that happen are almost invariably bipartisan things where we found common ground, can work together for the good of Indian country. On the other hand, when I say it's the worst of times, there are some challenges. I think particularly we need to have more bipartisanship in the appropriations process between the two bodies. The reality is the House this time outdid the Senate in terms of its commitment to funding of Indian programs. And when we got into the process of negotiation, we basically were fighting a bipartisan alliance on the House that wanted to keep money in Native American concerns, particularly in the health area. And on the Senate side, it wasn't so much opposition, it was just simply other priorities. They're not against what we're trying to do, but they have additional priorities. I would argue there actually should be few, if any, priorities higher than the trust relationship that the United States has with individual Indian nations. So we need to expand that bipartisan and bicameral cooperation. We need to build on the good works of Senator Akaka and Senator Barrasso and have a partnership where we move together, where frankly, Democrats and Republicans can go into Indian country with a great deal to be proud of instead of a great deal to apologize for. But let's be real. If we wait simply on the federal government to take care of our problems, we'll be waiting for a very long time. Indians of all people ought to know self-reliance, self-progress, self-determination, as Lieutenant Governor Keel said, are the real routes to moving forward. The government's job is to keep its commitments, honor its trust responsibilities, and work with us to remove the obstacles that have been placed in front of tribal development and the development of individual Indian people. That's something where we have a long way to go. The scope of our challenge is historic and monumental, and most Americans don't realize it. You know, I could sit here and quote ad nauseum statistics we all know and make the point in whether it's in terms of their education, their lifespan, their health, their opportunities to move forward. The first Americans are still, after over 230 years of this country's existence, the last Americans. That needs to change. It's a national disgrace. It's a national challenge. It'll take a national effort to move us in the right direction. I think the challenge for this particular organization is to educate the rest of America about the challenges that we face in Indian country. And I'm proud of what this organization has done, frankly, throughout its existence. It has a long and an honorable history of doing just that. But the scope of the challenge is just amazing. This summer, I had the honor of traveling with my good friend, Secretary Echohawk and Director Rubidoux, and Jody Gillette was with us from now the Interior, formerly with the White House, Congressman Simpson, Congressman McCollum from Minnesota, and we all went first to Chickasaw and Choctaw country in Oklahoma, where we have been fortunate. We've had challenges like other people have had challenges. This is not our historic homeland. My forebears didn't come there by choice, but they've used the tools and the opportunities they've had, and they've had their set of hardships, but they've overcome them in many ways. And we have thriving tribal economies, dynamic tribal governments that are doing well. Then we went to see some of our friends on the great reservations in North and South Dakota, who are also resilient, innovative, able, but their challenges are greater. And the challenges they face, Americans should see. They should go to Pine Ridge. They should go to Cheyenne River. They should go to Standing Rock. They should see some of the challenges that their fellow Americans are facing. And I'm sure if they saw them, they understood them, they would work with us to overcome them. So that's going to be our great challenge going forward. We have a very, very different perspective on American history. And I want to end with a couple of stories to drive that home. My great-aunt, Teato, was a very famous Indian folklore artist and storyteller, really of international renown. And she not only told stories of our people, Chickasaws, but a lot of tribes, and she used to pick up historical anecdotes and incidents and try to draw a moral out of them that an Indian would draw out of them. And I remember one, and I won't be able to quote it verbatim, but it's one of my favorites, and it's based on a real incident. It's an incident of a Southern Cheyenne war chief in treaty negotiations in the 1860s dealing with the American government and trying to comprehend and encapsulate in words the enormity of the challenge and the change that he was seeing in the course of his lifetime. And in the course of those treaties negotiations, he addressed the representatives of the United States government, and he was an American, but not an American citizen, obviously. And he said, once this was all the land of the red man, but then came the white man and the black man and the yellow man. And I've thought about this, and I've thought about nature. And in nature, aren't there white horses and black horses and red horses and horses of many colors? And I've thought about birds, and there are white birds and black birds and brown birds and red birds, but all one bird, all one horse, all one man. The Great Spirit must have wanted this to become the land of all the peoples, and so it shall be forevermore. Now, if you think about American history, that is a pretty profound way to encapsulate really who we are as a people, as an American nation. And that's where he concluded his story. But my great-aunt added, if you really know Indians, you really know what they don't say is sometimes more important than what they do say. And when he gave that eloquent speech and he recognized the changing reality of the world in which he lived, he did not say he would give up who he was or who his tribe was or his languages or his traditions. He intended to keep those within the greater whole that he was now becoming part of. That's who we are. We're the oldest part of America, the most remarkable part of America, actually the most diverse part of America, but each and every person in here who's a member of a tribe intends to remain who you are and to retain and pass on that identity, your culture, your traditions, but yes, your unique political status within the Constitution of the United States. Each generation of American Indians usually has to educate the rest of the country about what that status is, who we are, and who we intend to be. Our Navajo brethren have a real story and a phrase they use, and I'm going to take a little liberty with it, the long walk, one of the great tragedies that they went through as a people. But we ought to remember, when we think about the long walk, it's a little bit different than a lot of the traditions in Oklahoma, like Cherokees with the Trail of Tears, or Chickasaws with their forced removal stories, or so many of our tribes. The long walk, if you know the history, as of course most everybody in this room does, is a two-way walk. It was a long walk away, but it was a long walk back home too. And we're engaged as Native Americans in a very long walk, the longest walk in American history. And much of it was a walk away from who we were, and sometimes forced relocation, sometimes forced assimilation, sometimes forced efforts to literally eliminate tribal governments altogether. But we're now, I think, at the turning point, and we're in the long walk back home, the long walk back to retaining our sovereignty, retaining our identity, and retaining and celebrating the unique contribution that each and every Indian nation makes to this wonderful nation that we all call the United States of America. Thank you very much.